Good afternoon, all the way from Nairobi. We're still in Kenya this weekend. In nature, during nature, immersed in nature. And we were having banter behind the scenes and talking about how me wearing this green today has called nature into being. So we're manifesting. But as I often do, my name is Bui Mafuko. I am a luxury consultant and entrepreneur as well as a speaker. And my guest today is a peer in the industry. And I'll introduce him shortly. But to start, Africa on Luxury, if you're tuning in for the first time, is a luxury education platform where we really are going across the continent, chronicling the story of luxury. And we're really setting out to define what luxury means to us as Africans, and we're going to get into a little bit of that today from a different context. My guest today is Max Ngari. Hey, Max.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, very well.
How are you feeling?
Feel okay.
You feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay is good. Max is an award-winning executive creative director. He has over 14 years of experience in the creative industries, conceptualizing and executing big creative ideas for clients such as, how much time do you have? Airtel, Huawei, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Safaricom, you name them. He is very well decorated, and this has made him a solid creative leader who has delivered Agency of the Year, Digital Agency of the Year, and Media Agency of the Year, both in local and global communities. Max has also judged, please don't judge me today. He has also judged local and international juries such as Cannes Lions, the prominent Cannes Lions, Loeries, which, as we all know, come from the SA where I'm from, the Clios, One Show, as well as at Stars. He and I really loved this last part. He has set out to create environments that make that creatives feel seen in. Talented and motivated to deliver great ideas. I really like that. Some notable accolades: 4 times. How old are you? Cannes Lions winner. One show, a Grand Lynx, a Grand Clio, Loeries, a Cristal, Picture Awards, Grand Prix, numerous APAs, as well as MSK Awards. So as I mentioned, a very well-decorated creative. So Max, I always let my guests introduce themselves. Let's hear from you a little bit. Who are you? How you got into the creative industries, your background and that sort of thing.
Cool. Thank you so much for a really warm welcome. My name is Max Ngari. I'm the Executive Creative Director at Dentsu here in Kenya. And I tend to think of myself as a creative person. So I wake up every morning looking for inspiration. I like to work with amazing fellow creatives, people who want to solve big problems in this world. And I'm fortunate to do that here in Nairobi. And yeah, I like art. I like hanging around creative people. I like music. And yeah, that's who I am.
And how does one become a creative director, Max? An ECD, if how does one do that? Because you're specifically an executive creative director in the advertising industries. How does one make their way into creative direction?
I think first you really need to love advertising. Like when I started out, I was a nerd when it comes to like, keeping up with what is the latest ad out there. I used to look up to agencies like Scanad, Ogilvy, and really just praying one day that I'll work there. So how do you start? Have to be really obsessive about advertising. You want to know how to communicate to people or find out what makes people buy things or convincing people. And then finally, I think as you grow into your career, it's all about the craft. So honing into, like, for example, if it's art direction, so using that as a medium to communicate to people. And finally, when you have a handle of craft, you start creating teams of people who can do the same thing. And that's how you rise up the ranks to become a creative director and then an executive creative director. And to be honest, what I mostly do is I make sure that, the teams are working well, interface with clients, make sure that, the brands can be seen and people can communicate with them efficiently.
So what if is creative director the ceiling, or what happens next? Typically, I mean, it is in an agency structure.
Yeah.
An ECD, executive creative director, is right there at the top, an executive in the organization. So beyond this, where do you plan to take your career?
I mean, hopefully, so I do have a boss. I do have a chief creative officer that I report to, and he reports to like a worldwide chief creative officer. And where I want to go to is actually like a president level, where your job is to like write a book about creativity, go to different markets, trying to like understand what makes them spark. So there's quite a long way to go.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I'm there yet.
All right. And just to get then straight into our conversation and the reason why we're here, today we're talking about localizing campaigns for Kenyan consumers. And I know how much advertising can really have faux pas. So I'm really interested, because you work in this market, to just get into it. And I think, I made a note here that periods of economic pressure, and we can see that basically globally, the economies are distressed, and periods of economic pressure have a way of stimulating creativity. They have a way of stimulating demand for new services and products. They shift consumers' needs and expectations. And of course, we are all just clawing our way out of the pandemic, which for Africa, I think, has also had different implications. How are we able to leverage this environment to unlock the future of Africa creativity? Let's get into Kenya and the environment that we're seeing here today.
I mean, great question. I think just looking back at where we've come from, 2 years ago we saw all our budgets being stripped out. Yeah, we're working from home. There's not much advertising or creative advertising that was going out there. So we had to make ads inside our, we had to make ads.
What did that look like, actually?
It's basically you hold up your phone, you record content, and you send it to the editor. So, but out of that has come a lot of opportunities. So we've seen a lot of brands actually, because everything was mostly digital, yeah? So
Right.
you don't have time to go out there and shoot. We've seen most brands actually up their budgets when it comes to digital spending, which is a really great thing. We've seen new people come, new sorts of creatives come out of that time. So people who are able to shoot with minimal budgets, creators who are honing into one type of craft and making that, a very interesting piece of content. And also we've seen even people shift into how they consume their content. So
That's an interesting...
normally, your second screen, your third screen was your TV. Now you're thinking about the guy with a really simple phone in a remote part of Kenya. How will they see your content? So really shifts how we start consume, because it's all in your phone. And how do you make it interesting from there? So like you mentioned, the best creative comes out of constraints. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, our biggest one. And we're seeing very, very new type of mediums, type of creative people coming out. So that's super interesting as well.
Are you finding that clients' mindsets are receptive or open to these sort of emerging offerings in terms of creativity? Because in advertising, we know that it's quite typical to lead with TVCs or above the line advertising, as it were. Digital, of course, we've seen it grow significantly. But are you finding that have clients defaulted to their former pre-pandemic mindsets, or have they become receptive to the new creatives that are coming out, the new formats of content, and how we can deliver communication?
I think now more than ever, clients are actually more receptive. seeing as they saw what that period was and the kind of things that have come out. Now I think they're going into, can we accelerate this? Can we make it bigger? So if it's utilizing more creators and influencers for a campaign, other than shooting a TVC, they're picking the influencer.
Okay.
They're picking that route first. And then, using TV as almost a auxiliary or supportive content. But what is great now is because of their nice budgets, is we're able to uplift the kind of quality, the kind of craftsmanship that is going there. So, better budgets, better production values.
Absolutely.
So,
And I mean, Africa, it's documented everywhere at this point that Africa is the next big superpower. We've got the most prominent or vast youth population, which obviously just already opens you up to all sorts of ideas. There's also a thriving market emerging with boundless opportunities in every sector, just in terms of what we can do. Now, speaking about localizing communication or localizing campaigns, particularly Denso is global. When you're seeing brands, your Unilevers or whoever come into these markets, how are you, from a creative perspective, being able to drive locality?
So it's always, I can say from a creative and an agency perspective, it's always the hardest task to localize. One, because I'm taking different nuance, I'm taking different insights from what is, a global campaign that it's meant to be like one size fits all. And then I'm talking to my consumer. So I know my consumer, I know their pain points, and I kind of have a certain way of addressing them and talking to them about new stuff, yeah? So it's always a challenge trying to keep a very big brand or global brand and, keep its integrity intact, but still make it relevant to this local guy. But what we've seen as a method of creating is we always lead with our consumer first. So we're able to challenge global campaigns and say, this messaging won't work here, or this sort of product, it's too early, or, it's not, people won't receive it really well. So I think from where we sit, we have the ability to do that, to challenge actually what they're bringing into. And because we understand the consumer very well, we can be able to have a tailor-made solution for them. Sometimes it goes as much as changing certain colors of the product, changing the whole tagline of the product. And as long as, we can prove that we understand our audience better, that, this is African selling African stories, then it usually passes. But I do admit that there's a big challenge when it comes to localization.
And I mean, the biggest, on that, the biggest, which I think whether you're in the advertising industry or you're a consumer of products being advertised, has been the imagery and representation of Africans in advertising. How are you guys, as creative directors or agencies, resolving that? Because I do want to get into Mid-Journey and AI and everything that's coming out of there. But how have you found ways around, is it shooting locally? Because I know that global campaigns obviously always lead with creative that doesn't necessarily speak to the market.
So we always advocate for shooting locally. So we do need African faces on the advertising. We do need that representation. Even as they see it as global brands, they need to have a sense that there are people who consume their products from this part of the world, and they need to be seen. And I can give an example. 2 years ago, we were launching Netflix here, and they had a very nice product around giving Netflix for free. And it was sort of like a wild first for them because, they're never free. So what we really insisted and what we worked tirelessly with this client was, let's celebrate first African storytellers. You're a big storytelling brand, let's celebrate them. This has to be a platform for, you guys to share the spotlight before even you sell your
Own
products.
content, yeah.
And even in the end, it was you have to have some form of fund or something that you leave behind that keeps
As a
up.
legacy, yeah.
Exactly. And they did exactly that. So we managed to launch the product. Very interesting campaign where we were actually celebrating the Kenyan way of storytelling. So it's exaggerating stuff like that. And we worked with kids from Huruma. So some kids who who parody their shows. So something like Queen of Katwe or this other show for the chess pieces, Queen's Gambit. So these kids have been doing this for a long time, and we worked with Netflix to actually give them a stage. Have them be part and parcel of our ads. They came in and they learned how to direct. They worked with top directors in the
Wow.
industry. So that sort of localization is what I think is gold standard when it comes to a big brand's influence in our region.
Yeah. I love that example because obviously we are seeing the pervasive penetration of Netflix. And for them to, as a brand, be open, I can certainly say that we are seeing a lot more content coming out where production was difficult. And when you were producing independently, the quality obviously was compromised. We're seeing great productions coming out being backed and being put on platform by Netflix. So kudos to that. Let's get into Mid-Journey because this is early days. And I know that we're busy looking at, we've actually, by a client of ours, have been asked to participate in contributing to what the policy becomes for the use of AI. What is your viewpoint? Are you using it? Because I know that, and if maybe to give context, what for example, Mid-Journey is for listeners that might not be in advertising.
Okay. So AI has, I think in the last couple of years, really developed. And I think the first products you're seeing from that technology is software like Mid-Journey, ChatGPT, which are really just, it's an AI painting a picture. And that's been run by prompts. That's been run by writing. So you just tell the AI, I want to see a picture of a box with a bird in it, and it draws it for you. So those advances are happening in that side of the world, and the applications in creativity, in advertising are humongous. There's a huge debate going on at the moment around will AI take our jobs? Yeah. Will I replace my designer with an AI program? Do I need copywriters because now I have, a robot, a machine somewhere that can just write stories for days without...
That could write whole dissertations.
Exactly. But then, thinking how these softwares work, they're actually learning from artists. They're referencing, they're being trained because they're looking at other, work that has been published out there, and they're just copying it. So what we're seeing will happen in the next couple of years is there'll be a lot of copyright issues coming up from brands that are actually using AI in a very unethical way. Of course, even artists themselves will feel, hey, I can't sell my work anymore because there is a 10-year-old who can do almost the same style. But then, like we said, we always do our best work out of constraints. AI has opportunity of, sharing our voices. So the challenge to artists is get your work out there so that, we foresee a future where AI will be licensing styles from artists. They'll be licensing voices from singers. So that in itself is a new revenue stream that they didn't see.
Right.
For creatives who are in advertising, for us, we see it as a tool. So similar to how we use Photoshop, how we use Illustrator, your notepads, Midjourney and ChatGPT just help us sprint faster. So your client is asking you for 3 routes, you come back with 30 routes.
Damn.
Yeah, so good for you because you can do it.
And you didn't burn out your creatives.
Exactly. And then you're getting more time to do the things that you love. And of course, people want to see more AI-enabled creatives. So you have the understanding of all these different type of tools, and you're using it to create more value, revenue for yourself. So it's here, we have to adopt it. So that's what we're doing.
And I mean, I must say the positive side, I'm sure there is definitely a lot of controversy around AI and its practices because we're all basically navigating this uncharted path. But I have the imagination that has come out of it in terms of like the depiction of Africans in beauty. Like I've been seeing so like old people on runways being depicted like beautifully in African regalia. I have enjoyed that. So I think from that perspective, it's also opened up an imagination to a positive depiction of us as Africans, whereas before those images were not easily available. However, on the bitter end of the stick is the fact that, you know, people are, and naturally between East Africans, West Africans, we're all somehow related.
True.
And therefore there is a tendency to say, but that's me. It could have been an image of somebody in SA and somebody in Ghana is claiming that that's them. So an interesting space. And I think if you are interested in advertising, and I particularly want to get into it, the implication of AI on luxury, because we're seeing it. I mean, during COVID, we saw whole fashion shows happening virtually. Product placements are happening in games like Roblox and all these other things. Gucci, you know, like I've seen my kids drip themselves in Gucci in their avatars. So, I mean, just in terms of what it's doing in gaming, as an example, or more particularly in luxury, what are some of the opportunities for brands to leverage?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands. I think there's opportunity for brands actually commissioning for custom GPTs, custom AI models that are honing into their brand. So imagine having, you know, almost like an AI version of Coca-Cola, let's say, that is looking in its own assets, brand assets, products that it's made, and using that to imagine what the future would be like, using that to inspire people into making different things with the brand. So I think it's just having like clear strategies in what you want AI to do for your brand and using that to have a clear point of view about what your brand is, what it's here to do. And like I said, it's a tool, it can assist you, and that's what you like train it to do.
I mean, I've also seen it in art, where virtual art is being sold. I'm not sure if you have seen or have participated in any of those sort of virtual exhibitions, auctions, I suppose. I mean, from an e-commerce point of view, and I mean, the penetration of e-commerce is overcoming some of the barriers to trade as well, especially regionally, because we know that a lot of luxury brands aren't able to make their way onto the rest of the continent because of like infrastructural barriers and whatever and e-commerce is a clear opportunity and an avenue for brands to avail themselves more. All your favorite luxury brands, think of them. So how is that challenging the status quo of African industries, just like the online marketplace, when it comes to retailing or e-tailing, I suppose?
I think, and I can just speak from our market, we're seeing the e-commerce really starting to penetrate our markets. We're not there yet. We're not at the levels where South Africa or Egypt or, you know, even Europe or Middle East are. So I think for us, it's because I think our penetration is less than 10% now, people who buy things online. But what is, I think, great opportunity is now with help of tools like AI, it's easier to get your products into the e-tailing space much quicker. So I don't need to go and commission an expensive shoot, or I can really just start getting products on product shots or my things really quickly online. And because these platforms are, there's a new one every day coming up, it's easier for you to start marketing or convincing people that they can buy here. What I've seen that is working, because I work with a lot of young guys who are like trying to sell their crafts. I've seen a lot of thrifting. People using AI with their thrift clothes, and they're moving their products quite quickly. So I think in that respect, with e-commerce growing every day, there is opportunity to just make sure that your products get, to be seen much quicker when you're using these tools.
And I mean, talking about young people, I mentioned earlier that we have the biggest youth population in the world right now, Africa in its entirety. And we are seeing millennials challenging traditional parameters. They are definitely desiring new products and new experiences, new propositions from brands that just showcase one's distinctiveness. I mean, speaking about thrifting, they taking those and turning them into new products, new unique one-of-one pieces. And they currently make up the most of the global population, both in economic and consumption terms. So what are some of the low-hanging fruits with some of the brands that you work with that you guys are leveraging, or at least specifically building strategies for millennials?
So I would say, I think millennials are, most of them, like myself, are at the age where you're starting to think about starting a family, starting a business. You're probably, enjoying a very nice job. So you have a lot of income that's coming there. So definitely brands are trying to speak to this target now more than ever. We think, and being a millennial myself, it's always about the story I want to tell out there. Can I see myself in the advertising that convinces me to buy things, and how am I impacting the communities, the environment that they're in? So I think it has become very important, even for our brands, to have this mindset in place. So whatever we're selling to the consumer, they want to know it has to resonate 100% to them. It has to be themselves, their own story. They can see their own story in there. There has to be a bit of it that speaks to the contribution that the brand is making to the environment, which is a clear indicator of that we care about impact. So things like that. And of course, I think one of the things that is really pressing our country right now are things like job creation. So the brand's role in creating more jobs has to be seen. So I think it's one of those things that's super important for them. So they have to keep repeating it. They have to keep showing up for us and making sure that we're seen in the kind of work that they put out there.
Okay. And I mean, brands, in talking about localizing campaigns, there's definitely obviously a clear line in making sure that whatever the brand is connects to the local consumer market or identity or understanding. This two-way communication, because there's a greater desire as well for consumers to want to have conversations with brands, and brands to, there's almost like a reciprocal engagement that needs to constantly happen. We can't have brands that continue to preach and just put out blanket messaging that doesn't resonate. How are you, in your strategy work, ensuring that you're almost prompting, so even if it's with a big idea creative or a campaign line, you're prompting or eliciting a response from the consumer, and obviously ensuring more engagement?
So I think what we do really well at Dentsu is we're always making sure that the brands that we work with own the conversation around their category. So for example, if it's something like we're selling toothpaste, our brand needs to be leading a certain conversation within the toothpaste category. Whether it's around hygiene or whether it's around what sort of what sort of toothbrushing habits that you have. We want to be leading conversations. And we feel that people actually buy products out of conversation.
True.
And it's sort of like an African thing where I will ask my friend.
Yeah, testimonial.
Yeah, do you think this is a good product? So if your brand is constantly asking the question, how do you do this? How do you do that? Not only do you get like immense data around, how people are doing and their habits, but they're kept top of mind. So, of course, the conversations you usually want to have are the ones that not many people want to participate in.
Yeah.
So that provocation in terms of, is it something that people feel uncomfortable to address? And some of them is, can you use that conversation to, unbank stereotypes? So we're always on the hunt to lead a conversation.
Okay.
Be the guys who making sure that the conversation it's not the easy conversation, it's something hard. And that gets people talking and they end up buying your product because of that.
Now, getting into mobile, we spoke about e-commerce or e-retailing electronically. The mobile usage in Africa is a great starting point, right, for brands to leverage because it offers the convenience of on-the-go communication, on-the-go service delivery or product delivery. And in most markets, it's also the primary form of communication. From a localization perspective, again, what is the opportunity for brands to be leading with mobile? Especially because it makes it easier, I think, from a reach perspective. People already have devices on hand. In most instances, they have multiple devices on hand. And I'm not sure about here, but I know back home, people have the basic feature phone, the delivery of communication for those people who have the USSD and that sort of thing. And people have smartphones. And typically, they've got both. So from a creative and a communication perspective and a storytelling perspective, what is the opportunity for brands to leverage mobile, given that the penetration is already so high anyway?
I think there's great opportunity, and probably we'll see even the numbers becoming much more in terms of the people who have access, who are going, buying their next smartphone. So we can see that the numbers will actually become better, and that as a defense itself shows that there's an opportunity for brands to take advantage. What is happening to the creative world is now we're starting to look at formats very differently. Yeah, we're now shooting vertically for most of our ads. We're now putting a bit more, looking for probably people who have bigger WhatsApp groups. Yeah, we're looking for like almost subcultures in, and that's why you want to base your advertising on. And the great thing about, all these subcultures is now your targeting is more efficient. Yeah, we know that people scroll, I think, 3-4 times the size of the Eiffel Tower every time. So if you have an opportunity to give people a break from scrolling, people are actually starting to look at you as a different way of, as a different brand altogether. So content production is definitely going to change. We're going more vertical now. We'll be focusing on no sound in terms of how we're approaching like creating content, and even in terms of targeting is we're looking for more closed groups, more subcultures, where you can really talk to a specific group of people and know that you'll hit them with the right message.
And on that, I mean, with social media, how are you, you get briefs these days that say we want finger-stopping creative.
Always the case.
So how do brands declutter themselves when we're localizing content or campaigns? What are some of the nuances or practical things that you do in creative direction or in design to make sure that your brand or your campaign is standing out, especially on social media? I'm blown by that statistic, or at least what you've just shared, around that people scroll twice.
Almost 4 times now. Yeah.
Almost, wow. Yeah, but for social media, I mean, how are you specific? Maybe, here, particularly here in Kenya, referencing some of the brands that you've worked on, what are some of the campaigns that have performed well on social that you've seen, and what is it that you did differently there?
So, like we work on a local brand, local bank called KCB, one of the biggest, I think, banks in Eastern Africa. And we have a split in terms of how we speak to our audiences. One, we have the rule that our content is not Netflix content. So no one is waiting for the next show. No one is waiting for a big, premiere from your brand. So we need to entertain people. And even part of our content split is just having fun, engaging content. So we do memes, yeah. We have an admin who is really diabolical, who makes fun of people who are almost broke or going broke. And
As a bank. That ain't right.
So of course, but everything is leading back to, hey, we have a solution for you.
Yeah.
And it's all humor, it's all comedy.
Okay.
And
is that the general tone of this brand?
It is.
I get it. So it's like Nando's for us.
Exactly. So it's
like
a bit on the irreverent side. So, and we realize that consumers know it's advertising. They can tell that you're trying to sell them stuff. So do the opposite and entertain them.
Not so.
Give them a chance to laugh, laugh at themselves, laugh at society, laugh at something that happened in government. And that comic relief actually gives them space to grow. Like, I kind of wanna go to this bank. They're really fun. So I think that as a technique has really helped us, and we're seeing good results from it.
That's wonderful, because a bank is so suited up, isn't it? And intimidating.
Yeah.
You'd wish they'd give you money and not take the money. And as we close, what is your ultimate luxury?
Ultimate luxury. Does it have to be something?
No, it's an open-ended question.
Oh, wow. So one, I do want to collect really good art. I've grown up, or rather, I've been following the work of like Jean-Michel Basquiat for a long time. I think he was one of the guys that really, for me, painted expressionism in a very different way. Also being a person of color. So my ultimate form is to one day own a piece of
Basquiat.
Yeah, Basquiat. And if there are any of your viewers who has one, I'm happy to have a conversation.
I'm going to start a bidding war.
I'm happy to give you a payment plan, because I know it's not going to be cheap.
You know what they're fetching, his pieces these days. You know what they're fetching. But in the apps, up until you can afford the piece, there's other things you can collect. There's socks, there's t-shirt, there's merchandise that you can have a piece. I just bought myself a Basquiat t-shirt.
Oh, nice.
Recently too. I'm a fan.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for
It's a wrap.
me.
In nature, with all the elements.
Thank you so much.
We did it. Thank you for having me.